there will have been, people would have been prepared for this. I don't think so. It didn't happen. There is no manual.
Princess Anne has just launched a devastating legal strike against Queen Camilla, and the royal family is in absolute chaos. The Queen's only daughter has shattered decades of royal protocol, rejecting Camilla's final ultimatum and dragging the monarchy's darkest secrets into the courtroom. Palace insiders are calling it the nuclear option, a move so explosive it could bring down the entire House of Windsor. This isn't just another royal feud, this is war. Priceless heirlooms vanishing without a trace, secret vaults locked away from prying eyes, a stepmother accused of stealing the crown jewels meant for Britain's most beloved monarch's children. But what drove the Queen's most loyal daughter to take such drastic action? And how far was Camilla willing to go to keep her crimes hidden? The woman who served the crown for 70 years has declared, "Enough. Blood is boiling behind palace walls." While Britain mourned their beloved queen, something sinister was unfolding in the shadows of Windsor Castle. As millions wept for Elizabeth II, her most treasured possessions, symbols of 7 decades of unwavering duty, were disappearing into thin air. But this wasn't just theft. This was betrayal at the highest level. Palace archivists, tasked with the sacred duty of protecting the late Queen's legacy, discovered the unthinkable. The Victorian diamond flower brooch, passed down from Queen Victoria herself, gone. The sapphire and diamond necklace Elizabeth wore during her most important Commonwealth ceremonies vanished. A pearl tiara that hadn't been seen since state banquets in the 1980s erased from existence. And every missing piece pointed to one shocking truth. Staff members bound by decades of loyalty began whispering in terror. These weren't random disappearances. Someone with access, someone with power, someone trusted, was systematically dismantling the Queen's legacy piece by precious piece. The royal family was being robbed from the inside. Security footage mysteriously switched off, records deliberately erased, items marked as relocated for safekeeping that never made it to the royal archives. The trail led to a terrifying conclusion. Whoever was behind this knew exactly how to make Elizabeth's treasures disappear forever. But they didn't count on Princess Anne. Princess Anne has spent her entire life defending the crown. Now she was about to discover who was destroying it. The whispers reached the Princess Royal like poison spreading through palace corridors. At first, she dismissed them as gossip from grief-stricken staff, but the details were too precise, too consistent, too damning to ignore. The same treasures kept appearing in the rumors, and they were all connected to one person. Anne began her own investigation, questioning archivists who had served her mother for decades. Their answers, delivered in hushed, frightened tones, confirmed her worst fears. The Queen's most precious heirlooms hadn't just vanished. They had been deliberately stolen, and the thief was family. Late into the night, Anne sat alone in her study, holding an old photograph of her mother wearing the missing sapphire necklace. Elizabeth's calm, dignified presence in that image felt like a ghost demanding justice. The truth was about to explode everything. For Anne, this wasn't about money or jewels. It was about watching someone systematically erase her mother's legacy while the world still mourned. Someone was betting that Elizabeth's own children would stay silent while her life's work was carved up and hidden away. They were about to learn how wrong they were. What Anne discovered next would make headlines around the world. A loyal palace attendant, sickened by what she had witnessed, slipped Anne the evidence that would change everything. Hidden within Clarence House was a room most staff didn't even know existed. A private vault that Camilla had been using to store objects of great value. Objects that belonged to the late Queen. The evidence was devastating. Deliveries made under cover of darkness, security systems deliberately disabled, and, most damning of all, a photograph that would destroy Camilla's carefully constructed image forever. There it was, the sapphire necklace nestled in velvet, hidden from the world. The same necklace that had vanished from the Queen's official collection was now locked away in Camilla's private vault. Its distinctive design, known to every royal historian, left no room for denial. The Queen consort had been caught red-handed. For Anne, seeing that photograph was like watching someone dig up her mother's grave. The woman who had promised to honor Elizabeth's memory was systematically looting it, piece by precious piece. But this was only the beginning of Camilla's deception. Staff members, emboldened by Anne's investigation, began revealing more shocking details: midnight transfers, forged documents, a deliberate campaign to steal the Queen's legacy while her body was still warm. The full scale of the betrayal was about to be exposed. The gloves were off. The royal family was about to tear itself apart. Every family gathering became a battlefield. Every public appearance was now a performance hiding the vicious war raging behind palace doors. Anne's piercing stares cut through Camilla like daggers, each glance a reminder that her crimes had been discovered. Camilla knew she was trapped. The Queen Consort's attempts at damage control were pathetic and transparent. Charming smiles couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. Public praise for Anne's charitable work rang hollow when everyone knew the truth. She was trying to buy silence with flattery. But Anne doesn't negotiate with thieves. The confrontation erupted during a private luncheon at Buckingham Palace. As Charles discussed upcoming ceremonies, Anne struck like a viper. She mentioned with surgical precision that certain artifacts from her mother's collection remained missing from official inventories. The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla's fork froze midair. Her practiced smile flickered and died. Charles shifted uncomfortably, suddenly understanding that his wife and sister were locked in a battle that could destroy them all. The declaration of war had been made. Palace staff scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Sides were chosen. Loyalties were tested. The monarchy, already fragile in the public eye, was now eating itself alive from within. And Anne was just getting started. Camilla had survived decades in the royal spotlight by eliminating threats before they could destroy her. But she had never faced Princess Anne. The ultimatum came like a death sentence, delivered in the ornate drawing room of Clarence House. Camilla's voice, usually honey-smooth, now carried the steel of desperation. Her demands were simple but devastating. Anne would stop her investigation, cease all public hints about the missing jewels, and allow Camilla to manage Elizabeth's heirlooms without interference. In exchange, Anne could keep her public role and dignity. It was the offer of a desperate woman. But Anne heard what Camilla really meant: comply or be destroyed. Submit or watch your mother's legacy disappear forever. Become complicit in the greatest theft in royal history, or face the consequences. Anne's response was swift and brutal. She reminded Camilla that the heirlooms didn't belong to her, would never belong to her, and that stealing from the crown was a crime that would be punished. The meeting lasted minutes, but its impact would shake the monarchy forever. Camilla left the room in blind fury. Anne left with quiet determination. Palace staff, witnessing Camilla's rare display of uncontrolled anger, knew that the conflict had escalated beyond all previous royal feuds. This wasn't about hurt feelings or protocol disputes. This was about justice. And Anne would get it. The ultimatum had been rejected. The final battle was about to begin, and Camilla was about to discover that threatening the Queen's daughter was the biggest mistake of her life. Anne was preparing to go nuclear. Princess Anne didn't just reject the ultimatum. She responded with a legal weapon that could obliterate Camilla's position forever. The Princess Royal assembled a team of the Crown's most ruthless legal advisors, experts who knew every loophole, every precedent, every constitutional law that governed royal property. Together, they built a case so airtight that Camilla's destruction was inevitable. Every stolen item was documented. Every lie was exposed. Every crime was recorded. The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs of the missing heirlooms in Camilla's private vault, sworn statements from horrified staff members, records of deliberate tampering with royal archives. Anne had built a legal fortress that Camilla could never breach. But Anne's masterstroke was yet to come. Hidden in Elizabeth's private papers was a handwritten letter, a document that would end Camilla's reign of theft forever. In her own words, the late Queen had designated Anne as the guardian and heir of her most precious personal heirlooms. Camilla's claims were not just wrong, they were criminal. The legal notice delivered to Clarence House was a masterpiece of controlled fury. It outlined every law Camilla had broken, every protocol she had violated, every treasure she had stolen. The message was clear: return the heirlooms immediately or face public prosecution. For the first time in decades, Camilla was truly afraid. Her advisors scrambled desperately to find escape routes, but Anne had anticipated every move. The evidence was public-ready, the legal arguments were bulletproof, and the political consequences were catastrophic. Camilla was cornered, and she knew it. The final confrontation arrived like Judgment Day. Clarence House, usually a symbol of royal power, now felt like a courtroom. Anne entered with her evidence, her legal team, and the unshakable confidence of someone who had caught a criminal red-handed. Camilla's composure finally cracked. The Queen Consort sat rigid in her chair, surrounded by her own advisors who looked increasingly uncomfortable as Anne's presentation began. What followed was 45 minutes of systematic destruction that left no room for denial or deflection. Faced with photographs of her secret vault, sworn statements from palace staff, and the Queen's own handwritten letter naming Anne as heir, Camilla's carefully constructed denials crumbled into dust. Anne's legal team presented each piece of evidence with devastating precision. High-resolution photographs showed the sapphire necklace in its velvet-lined case, the Victorian brooch displayed prominently on a custom stand, the pearl tiara positioned as if ready to be worn. The sapphire necklace, the Victorian brooch, the pearl tiara were all evidence of systematic theft. But Anne's team went a bit further. They presented financial records showing payments to private storage facilities, phone records documenting coordination with security firms, even insurance policies that had been secretly taken out on several of the missing items. Camilla wasn't just a thief, she was running a criminal enterprise inside the palace behind everyone's back. Sir Malcolm Winters, Anne's lead counsel, methodically dismantled every possible defense. He demonstrated that Camilla had no legal claim to any of the items, that their removal violated multiple laws, and that the conspiracy involved fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and criminal misappropriation. Anne's presentation was methodical, devastating, and undeniable. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow, destroying Camilla's credibility and exposing her crimes to the light. Security footage showed unmarked vehicles at Clarence House. Staff testimony revealed threats and bribes. Financial records exposed a web of payments and offshore transfers. But Anne's final move was pure genius. She produced the late Queen's letter, written in Elizabeth's own hand, explicitly stating that these personal treasures were meant for Anne and her children. The document was authenticated by handwriting experts, witnessed by Elizabeth's private secretary, and legally binding. Camilla wasn't just defying royal protocol, she was violating the Queen's final wishes. The letter was devastating in its clarity and emotion. Elizabeth had written about her hope that these treasures would remain in the family, passing from mother to daughter as symbols of continuity and love. She had specifically chosen Anne as their guardian, trusting her to preserve their historical significance. Reading her mother's words aloud, Anne's voice never wavered, but the impact was crushing. Camilla's legal team exchanged desperate glances, realizing they had no viable defense. Her principal advisor whispered urgent consultations, but every option led to the same conclusion: complete and public defeat. The battle was over. Anne had won. Minutes of unbearable silence filled the room as Camilla realized her defeat was total and public. The heirlooms would be returned, the truth would be recorded, and her authority would never recover. But the humiliation wasn't finished. Anne announced that all evidence would be preserved in the royal archives, creating a permanent record of the theft and recovery. Future historians would know exactly what had happened to Queen Elizabeth's treasures and who had tried to steal them. Anne left quietly, her victory absolute and undeniable. As she gathered her papers and prepared to leave, Anne delivered one final statement that would echo through royal history. The crown's treasures belong to the nation and to history. They are not personal property to be hidden away or sold off. The Queen's daughter had restored justice to the monarchy. Camilla remained seated long after Anne's departure, staring at the evidence that had destroyed her reputation. Her advisors began discussing damage control strategies, but they all knew the truth. This was a defeat from which there would be no recovery. The earthquake that followed reached every corner of the globe. Within hours, fragments of the story began leaking to a press hungry for royal scandal. Staff members, no longer afraid of Camilla's retaliation, shared details of midnight thefts and secret vaults. The story exploded across every front page, every news channel, every social media platform on Earth. The public's reaction was swift and merciless. Hashtags demanding justice trended worldwide for days. Return. The jewels reached 50 million tweets in 24 hours. Camilla Thief became the most shared hashtag in British history. Royal watchers dissected every photograph, every appearance, every interaction between Anne and Camilla from the past months. The evidence had been hiding in plain sight. Television networks canceled regular programming to cover the scandal. CNN, BBC, Sky News, every major broadcaster scrambled to get experts on air. Former palace staff emerged from retirement to share their insights. Constitutional experts debated the legal implications on live television around the clock. "This is bigger than the Diana crisis," declared royal biographer Margaret Hartwell on national television. Emergency debates were called in Parliament. Opposition leaders demanded investigations into royal finances and security protocols. The scandal was threatening to destabilize the entire constitutional monarchy. Camilla's reputation was in absolute ruins. Her attempts at damage control looked desperate and pathetic. Public appearances became exercises in damage limitation, each smile looking more forced than the last. Every statement sounded hollow. Every explanation fell apart under intense media scrutiny. International leaders began distancing themselves from the scandal. The Commonwealth nations, who revered Queen Elizabeth's memory, expressed deep concern about the allegations. The Canadian Prime Minister called for transparency and justice. Australia's Parliament passed a unanimous motion supporting the preservation of Her late Majesty's legacy. Even European royalty began whispering about the scandal. Private communications between royal houses expressed shock and dismay. The Dutch Queen cancelled a planned visit to Britain. The Swedish royal family quietly postponed a joint charity initiative with Camilla. Meanwhile, Anne's stock soared to unprecedented heights. The public saw her as the defender of their beloved queen's legacy, the principal daughter who had risked everything to preserve her mother's memory. Donations poured into her charities, over £2 million in a single week. Support messages flooded palace mailboxes from around the world. Protests erupted outside Clarence House. Crowds gathered daily, holding signs reading "Justice for Elizabeth" and "Return the Crown Jewels." Police had to establish permanent barricades to manage the growing demonstrations. The chant, "Princess Anne, Princess Anne," echoed through the streets of London for weeks. The royal family was forced into unprecedented crisis mode. Emergency meetings were held at Buckingham Palace multiple times per day. Charles, caught between his sister's righteous fury and his wife's desperate situation, struggled to maintain any semblance of control. Palace communications teams worked around the clock to contain the explosive damage, but the leaks kept coming like a broken dam. More staff members came forward with additional evidence every day. Security guards revealed more incidents of suspicious nighttime activity. Even the Queen's former dresser, now in her 80s, gave a tearful television interview confirming Anne's version of events. The heirlooms were quietly returned to the royal archives. Under cover of darkness, unmarked vehicles transported Elizabeth's treasures back to their rightful place. Official photographs were released showing their restoration, inventories were corrected with military precision, and the Queen's collection was finally complete again. But the damage to the royal family was permanent and devastating. Opinion polls showed Camilla's popularity had plummeted to historic lows, lower than any royal in recorded history. Support for the monarchy itself had taken a significant hit, with younger generations questioning whether such institutions could survive modern scrutiny. Anne had won the war completely and utterly. She had exposed the theft, recovered the treasures, and protected her mother's legacy against impossible odds. Camilla's authority was shattered beyond repair, her credibility destroyed forever, her position weakened to the point of irrelevance. The monarchy would never be the same. For the first time in generations, a member of the royal family had chosen truth over harmony, justice over unity. Anne had proven that even within the most traditional institution on earth, some lines could never be crossed without consequences. But the victory came at an enormous cost. The royal family's carefully maintained image of unity was shattered into a million pieces. Charles and Camilla's marriage was under unprecedented strain that palace insiders said might be irreparable. The very foundations of the monarchy had been shaken by revelations that one of its most senior members was capable of such calculated betrayal. The Queen's daughter had kept her final promise. In protecting Elizabeth's legacy, Anne had also protected the future of the crown itself. She had demonstrated that the monarchy could police itself, that justice could prevail even within its most guarded circles, and that some principles were worth fighting for regardless of the personal cost. The war was over, justice had prevailed, and the crown would survive, forever changed but ultimately stronger.